Welcome to the 9th video in the series, The Character of the Communist Mode Production According to Marx and Engels. Today, we'll be going over the 1885 piece by Marx, Capital Volume 2, Chapter 16, The Turnover of Variable Capital. I have subtitled this, Planned Production and Distribution Overcomes Capitalist Limits. All systems of production must continuously reproduce the conditions necessary for their own existence. This includes the mode of production, which is made up of its specific forces and relations of production. Communism is no exception. It must sustain and expand itself by developing its unique mode of production, thereby reinforcing the forces and relations of production distinctive to it, in contrast to other systems. These elements form the basis of its laws of motion. This process of reproducing its own conditions serves as a material foundation of communism, and as the mode of production advances, this cycle of renewal and expansion deepens and intensifies. In capitalism, exploitation is not embedded within the amount paid to the worker in money, but rather in the wage relation and the mode of production itself. All surplus product becomes surplus value, and thereby with or without transference into money or actual sale of the products produced, it is still exploitation because surplus value extraction occurs during production itself. The amount of surplus value that can be produced depends on the magnitude of variable capital employed and degree of exploitation of labor, but the amount of variable capital that can be employed relies on advanced money capital. Therefore, in capitalism, money capital determines the rate of surplus value within the larger macro constraint on production that is possible under capitalism. However, this is not necessary. In communism, surplus value is not produced. Rather, instead, surplus product might be. The amount of labor employed by it is not constrained on anything but labor itself in the most direct sense, thus allowing the maximum cap on production possible. There is no money capital which binds the direction of labor, and so communist society calculates the raw inputs of any project, no matter how large or long, and determines socially if it should proceed. Communism is naturally capable of long-term planning and organizing. In addition, in capitalist society, projects that take significant amounts of time without producing surplus value, like railways or power plants, are very difficult to justify producing by individual capitalists. In communism, though, because there is no money capital or the binding of direction of labor to such, all communist society needs to do is 1. Calculate how much labor, means of production, and means of subsistence can be invested in the project without detriment to the rest of society, and 2. Extract labor, means of production, and means of subsistence from total annual production to support the prolonged project. As such, communism thrives on and is extremely capable of this sort of long-term planning and development. While capitalist society must jump through all sorts of hoops to engage in developmental projects, communism does it as a matter of course in its own natural reproductive system. In capitalism, social reason asserts itself after the fact and is constantly vulnerable to changes in the market which can stop development, since any such long-term project requires constant and long-term advancements. And I'm sure that we all are aware of failed malls and projects that end up being done nothing on for months or even years, possibly even decades, and then getting abandoned halfway through even, completely. Continuing, projects that have long turnovers and therefore do not immediately produce surplus value still require the workers to be paid so they can maintain themselves. Thus, as workers pay money into the market for means of subsistence, while not actually adding to the stock, demand increases without supply also increasing. As a result, productive materials and means of subsistence rise in price, and from that, speculators start emerging in the field of productive materials and means of subsistence, further artificially inflating the demand for these. Despite this, production is not based on demand, it is based on material capacity for production. As examples, plants don't grow faster just because speculators increase demand. Rather, it simply results in demand for imports, In comparison to such, industry that can be expanded like mining results in a sudden increase in production, which, in turn, results in overproduction when speculation goes over expectation. Prices rise and then immediately collapse in regular boom-bust cycles. Hence, a continually widening division between town and country, core and periphery, uneven and combined development. This also occurs in the labor market. These new mines and whatnot attract many and absorb some of the reserve army of labor. This in turn causes a general rise in wages, but it is temporary. The businesses then crash, labor is set loose, and wages reduce maximally. Further, capitalism also seeks to maximize the price of commodities on the market, but minimize the price of labor power. Thus, the workers can't buy their own products and can buy less and less of it. This makes capitalists less capable of selling their products, which leads to greater overproduction. Capitalism is also unable to actually reach full production potential because anytime it seeks to, it leads to this overproduction. The sale of commodities, and thus the realization of surplus value, is limited by the fact that society cannot actually buy everything it produces. The period necessary to get any given product ready for the market is materially determined. It is based on existing material conditions of production specific for that product. Therefore, the market is a post hoc recognition of value. It can only ever be such. Communism, on the other hand, has no such need of post hoc recognition, as it determines it through labor directly. In communism, in comparison, there is no such speculation, no such supply and demand shifts. The means of subsistence are understood directly and socially consumed, while production is in line with material reality and is planned, without any such boom or bust cycles. Labor consumes all necessary means of subsistence, and since overproduction is impossible, since communist society can consume all that it produces, that means that there ceases any and all fetters on consumption aside from society's productive capacity itself. Hence, people will have access to more under communism than they ever would under capitalism. And I do recommend a piece called Less is More by Jason Hickel. And that is the end of my summary of Marx's Capital Volume 2, Chapter 16, The Turnover of Variable Capital. If you'd like to go over the quotations that I extracted this summary from, or rather produce this summary from, then feel free to go into the description below, and there will be a link to this Google Doc in there. And if you want to discuss this further, then feel free to enter into the United Marxist Pact Discord server. Tomorrow we will be going over the 1885 piece by Marx, Capital Volume 2, Part 3, The Reproduction and Circulation of the Aggregate Social Capital, Chapter 18, Introduction. Thank you for joining me for today's topical summary, and I hope to see you tomorrow.